This mystery has stirred up debate over centuries. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? Today we're going to do an investigation of the evidence and try to figure out a conclusion of who wrote it. The book of Hebrews stands as one of the most profound and theologically rich books in the New Testament. However, it also carries with it the age-old question, who wrote it? While the text itself does not provide a definitive answer, various theories and scholarly debates have proposed authors such as Barnabas, Apollos, Luke, and even Priscilla. Among these, the strongest argument points to Paul as the author. So today, I want to dive into the evidence that supports Paul's authorship of Hebrews. The early church provides an essential starting point for examining the authorship of Hebrews. While there was no unanimous agreement, many church fathers and scholars from early centuries believed that Paul wrote Hebrews. Clement of Alexandria, Eusebius, and even Augustine acknowledged the Pauline association. Albeit with varying degrees of certainty, the Eastern Church in particular leaned heavily towards Paul as the author, which influenced the inclusion of Hebrews in the canon under Pauline authorship. Critics often argue that the writing style of Hebrews differs significantly from Paul's other epistles. While it is true that the Greek in Hebrews is more refined and rhetorical than what we typically see in the Pauline letters, there are valid explanations for these discrepancies. First, Hebrews was written to Jewish believers who were familiar with the Old Testament and needed encouragement to stay faithful to Christ amid persecution. This audience required a different approach compared to Paul's other letters, which were often addressed to the Gentile churches or specific individuals. The elevated language and deep theological expositions in Hebrews suggest that the author wanted to communicate at a scholarly level. Second, Paul's use of amanuenses or scribes is well documented, as we see in Romans 16. It is possible that Paul employed a different scribe for Hebrews who was influenced by the stylistic nuances of the text. This could explain why Greek in Hebrews is more polished. Third, despite stylistic differences, Hebrews shares key theological themes with Paul's known letters. And these include the supremacy of Christ. Hebrews extensively discusses Christ's superiority over the angels, Moses, and the Levitical priesthood. This focus aligns with Paul's teachings in Colossians 1 and Philippians 2, where he emphasizes the preeminence of Christ. Then there's justification by faith. While Hebrews approaches faith from the perspective of perseverance and endurance, it echoes Paul's teachings on faith as means of justification. And finally, sacrificial language. Paul frequently uses sacrificial imagery to describe Christ's atoning work, like Ephesians 5 and 1 Corinthians 5. Hebrews, in particular, elaborates on Christ as the ultimate sacrifice, fulfilling the Old Covenant system, a theme central to Pauline theology. But one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for Paul's authorship is found in Hebrews 13:23, which states, "Know that our brother Timothy has been set free, with whom I shall see you if he comes shortly." Timothy was a close associate and protege of Paul, frequently mentioned in Paul's letters, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and 1 Thessalonians. This mention of Timothy strongly suggests a connection to Paul or someone within Paul's immediate circle. Now, the primary argument against Pauline authorship is the absence of Paul's customary self-identification. In all of Paul's known letters, he begins by stating his name and his position as an apostle. However, the absence of his name in Hebrews can be explained by considering the potential stigma associated with his apostleship among the Jewish audiences. Paul was a controversial figure to some in the Jewish community due to his mission to the Gentiles. By leaving his name out, Paul could have ensured that the Jewish readers would approach the letter without prejudice, focusing solely on its content. Many respected scholars throughout history have supported a Pauline authorship of Hebrews. Origen, 3rd century, famously said, "Who wrote the epistle? God only knows certainly." But he also suggested that the thoughts reflected Paul's theology, though the language might not be directly his. Clement of Alexandria believed that Paul wrote Hebrews in Hebrew and that Luke translated it into Greek, which could account for the stylistic differences while maintaining Pauline theology. Now, Hebrews does lack some of the personal touches found in Paul's other letters. This can be explained by the intended audience and the formal sermon-like nature of the text. It is crucial to remember that Hebrews is unlike any other letter in the New Testament. It functions more as a theological treatise and exhortation than a traditional epistle. The content aims to affirm the superiority of Christ and strengthen the faith of the Jewish Christians under pressure to revert them to traditional Judaism. The deep use of Old Testament references from Melchizedek in Hebrews 7 to the priestly rituals in Hebrews 9 speaks to the author who had an expert knowledge of both Jewish customs and the fulfillment of Christ in these, qualities that Paul possessed. While the true authorship of Hebrews may remain a mystery this side of heaven, the evidence supporting Paul as the author is compelling. The theological consistency, the mention of Timothy, and the style adaptable for his audience, and the historical views of the early church leaders all point toward Paul. Hebrews may not start with Paul's name, but its content reflects a deep knowledge of the Old Testament, a passion for Christ's supremacy, and the commitment to the encouraging believers to persevere in the faith. Until the day we know for sure, the Epistle of Hebrews remains a testament to God's revelation and a powerful encouragement for believers. Whether penned by Paul or another, its teaching calls us to endure, run the race with perseverance, and fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. If you want to dive deeper, I have a link to the full study in the description with scriptural references. If you want more Bible studies like this, hit that like and subscribe button. And until next time, be strong and of good courage. God bless.